Well, good morning to everyone, wherever you are watching from, but especially during the week when the presentation is finished. So welcome to TomPadulaTV on YouTube and Insegna Booksellers. This is World History, and I am covering the history of the world just initially, very gentle. I mean, just the main points in order to cover the full world, and then we can come back to it, because history is for a very long time. It's it's the past, but it's also the present, and it's also our future. So welcome to John, Geronimo, Colin and Maria Anna. Appreciate the fact that some people are coming to this history presentation. I am getting very excited about the history part, because it's given me a very big uplift, spiritual uplift, because by studying history, you understand the present problems we have a little bit better. And today, as I said, I'm going to continue with China. I'm covering China at the moment, and I've been looking at China, and I thought, this is interesting. The fact that I'm just going to show you something. Let me see. There it is. I thought I'd show it to you now. There we are. That's China. I know everyone knows, but how many people actually know the various regions of China? There are 30 of them, and 18 apparently. 18 of them, where mostly Chinese, the traditional Chinese people live, but the other 12, 14 on the outer. And these other regions now are becoming more and more important to China itself, because we're calling this the Chinese century. And the reality is that China was a very important and also very much admired by the Europeans, except for the last couple hundred years. Before that, from Marco Polo onwards, when he introduced China to, with his Il Milione book to the Venetians and to Italy and Europe in general. So it's worthwhile looking at the various regions of China and understanding that there is there's a climatic change too, from very cold winters up the north to the tropical south and everything else in between. So that's it. I'm going to come back to you, because that was one. Now, the other thing that I'm going to do today is before the invasion. We're coming up to our Australia Day. And I've always celebrated the whole week, not just one day. Australia Day Celebration Week, or couple of weeks, because all the groups that form modern Australia can call Australia home, and the land owns them as well. Because, for example, I came in '63 in Australia. I've spent most of my time here in Australia. I can never forget the town I was born in, and I've gone back there and have a look. Spend a few days, but the reality is that my life is where I live, and the longer you stay in one place, the more you become part of it. So it's important for people who've been here for 60,000 years, and since then, whoever, to appreciate the fact that the land owns all of us, and therefore we need to appreciate the fact that things do happen, wars happen, famines happen, cruelty happens amongst humans, and other nations too have suffered similar invasions, and a lot worse than in Australia, I can assure you. So I just look at the American. So that's why I'm doing the world history, because history needs to be taught from the beginning on a world scale, and then slowly come back to the national histories and the local history, etc. So there's a lot to do there. But today it's 11:30. I'm going to start. And soon after that, if you stay on after before the invasion notes on fishing, I will also do something from Melbourne here, from my library of videos. So here we go. This one here is about Confucius. Last week I spoke about the birth of Confucius and about 300 years before the Great Wall was built. So we're talking about 560, I can't remember now. We can look it up. It's interesting. And also the fact that China has many religions, not just Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism. They are the main traditional ones, but then there is also Christianity, Islam, Chinese folk religion, Hinduism, Tibetan Buddhism, Catholic, Theravada. So there are, I think, slowly but surely, as China becomes part of our world more and more in its importance and its influence, there is what happens with the colonials, for example, that the people they colonized got to see where they come from. Just go to England. 1940s to now, what a change. Anyway, that's the interesting part. Here we go. Welcome to Giuseppe De Luisa. Confucius did not found a religion. Confucianism is not strictly a religion. It's more like a philosophy, but a very important one for China. There are no Confucian priests or temples in China, though there are many monuments to the memory of Confucius. Just as there are monuments to great explorers in Australian cities and in other nations, the explorers, the people of importance, so people who had a great influence on the nation. Confucius was what the ancient Greeks called a philosopher. Okay? So he loved wisdom, he wanted to help people achieve happiness and harmony and peace and, all the good things that we admire and we still strive for in our history, in our modern life. And he spent most of his life teaching. Well, I'm doing the same. It's for some reason there are people who are born to sort of go out there and do something. And now with this modern technology, we're getting to there's a flood of these of these possibilities of learning about a variety of many different things from what people call themselves as experts. I claim not to be. I'm a teacher of history, but I'm learning all the time. And that's what I want people to do. I don't want to influence you. I want to do it for yourself. But if you come on to see what I'm doing, maybe you can get inspiration from that. There's another important element in the philosophy in Chinese culture, and that is the consideration for others, consideration for others. So do not do to others what you would not like to have done to yourself is perhaps the most striking of the sayings of Confucius. Now I chased up in my warehouse of books the sayings of Confucius' sayings in Italian. Of course, it's a book in Italian. It would be interesting to read a few of them eventually. Okay, so that is perhaps the most striking, because that reminds us of the Ten Commandments. You've got to treat other people as you would others treat you. For it sums up the idea of love for one's fellow men and women, which is so important a part of all moral teaching. So, these prophets, these philosophers are all interested in getting their message across. It's very hard to listen to someone and then to actually follow their teaching. And when you follow the teaching, and some people abuse those teachings, and some are the big religions of the world, the bigger you become, the more the corruption occurs. This can't be helped. It's part of humanity. Moderation. That's another one of the philosophies of Confucius. He taught too that men should strive, and women should strive, to be moderate in all things. Don't do too much of anything, don't do too little of anything. Do a variety. Too much of anything, even of goodness itself, is bad. So if you're goody, and people don't learn about the rough part of life, and therefore they can take advantage of you. Now that's in Christian philosophy, that was brought to extreme by Jesus Christ. He went on the cross and he died. He's one of the only prophets who really, copped it and didn't say much. He said, well, when you come upstairs, we'll look after you. So at the moment, I'm reading Dante's Inferno, Purgatorio and Paradiso on a Sunday at the same time because, again, he was a writer, philosopher, etc. So these things are across the world. So moderation. So you goody people are really thieves of virtue. That's what it says. If you're too good all the time, you need a balance. What do they call it? Mothers who are very strict, but they love their children, etc. I don't know. We've gone the other way. We want our children, our spoilt mind. We all do. But sometimes then you pay for that eventually, in some way or another. So whatever you've done in the past comes back. So moderation is important, and bring in the rough part of life too in that moderation. Learn to say no. Learn to not accept certain people who want to put you down and you want to accept it. No, just say, this is not good enough. But, watch it, because some people then take it very personally and they can hurt others, and including you and me. So it's good to keep the balance. You goody people are really thieves of virtue, he wrote, expressing perfectly the feelings of most school children about the good pupil who tries too hard to please a teacher. And that happens in factories, used to happen in factories, the one who works too hard, in an office, etc. Sometimes you've got to use this moderation thing. That's what Confucius is teaching us. That's what he wants to teach. The other thing that is very important in Chinese culture, according to Kung Fu Tzu, that was Confucius' real name, Kung Fu Tzu. Kung, K-U-N-G, dash, Fu, F-U, dash, Tzu, T-S-E, Kung Fu Tzu. That's Confucius. Importance of family life, big in Chinese culture. Confucius and many other cultures, including the one I come from. Confucius also stressed the great importance of family life. And we should remember that in China, the family means all the living descendants of the oldest male member. Now, politically, that's very important because the old emperors and the people they controlled would control this older family member. And some family members would have 100, 200 people under them. So if somebody did the wrong thing in your family, then the person at the top would come. It's control. You're able to control when you divide and conquer, they say. And that's, this importance of family life has benefits, but it also has some disadvantages. So let's not always talk about the benefits of enlarged family life. There are also, it's not always, sometimes not pleasant, depending on who's at the top. Okay, so family means all the living descendants of the oldest male member. Even today, a father, if he can afford it and if he lives long enough, will have his sons, grandsons and great-grandsons and their families all living under his roof. you better be good with the banks. In such a household, good manners, politeness and respect for one's elders would be much more necessary for comfort than they are with us. So in other words, the larger the family, the more you have to show respect, etc. The more you have to be a diplomat. Because without being a diplomat, there's going to be internal wars and battles. And they can last for very many years and for generations. So in such a household, good manners, politeness and respect for one's elders would be much more necessary for comfort than they are with us. Now, in our Australian settings and in many other countries too, there's family violence in small households. That's the other side of small households. There's the control. Somebody can abuse the weaker members. And therefore, so that's why history, when you look at history, you can't just look at what the person who wrote the book says, yes, but then you've got to do your own thinking and say, well, in my experience, is this okay? Is this not, questioning all the time is important for yourself. So in such a household, good manners, politeness and respect for one's elders would be much more necessary for comfort than they are with us. Perhaps that is partly why Confucius stressed these virtues so strongly. Since his death, his influence has continued to grow, and no Chinese boy or girl grows up without being trained to try to follow the principles Confucius taught: kindness, moderation, tolerance and good manners. And these are also tenets of other religions and other philosophers. But Confucius, there are 1.4 billion people in China. So if he has influence over those in terms of all this, then when we deal with people from China, Chinese culture, you've got to watch your P's and Q's because of this. We want them to be more open, but they want us to be more the other way. So that comes from Confucius. Well, that's that. It's a short one today about Confucius because, let me see, I've got more time to dedicate to China. Now, China is a big country. It's in terms of land mass, it's just as big as Europe and just a little bit bigger than America, than the United States. And it's got 1.4 billion people living there. The United States got 350, not even 400 million yet. We have to learn about China. And a good one for people of Italian background and non is to watch, to read Marco Polo's book, Il Milione. Marco Polo he wrote it when he went back to Venice, and then Venice was fighting Genoa, and they captured him and put him in prison, and someone else wrote the book. He was telling the story of his time in China, because his dad and uncle had gone there before him, and then he followed, and he was used by the Mongol king to be like an ambassador, an important person in the China of the Mongol kings. That's 1200. And now I'm watching at the moment on Netflix called a series called Ertugrul. That's the Turkish Empire, the Seljuks and the Turks, the beginning of the Ottoman Empire, basically, just before. Resurrection, it's called. Ertugrul Resurrection. Very interesting. So these history lessons that I'm giving now, presentations, they can be called lessons, but they can also be called presentations. And they really are presentations, because I don't have that classroom interaction with students. It's an advantage and a disadvantage. But, I deal with what I've got, and that's what I'm doing. The geography of China, important to learn the regions of China, the rivers, the mountain chains, the flatlands where rice is grown. So let me read something to you from another book. China is about the size of Europe and is a land that has many varied geographical features. Great mountain ranges and a desert plateau cut China off from the rest of Asia. The south of China is subtropical with a monsoon climate. Its hills are densely forested, while northeast China has very cold winters, experiencing frigid conditions for up to 8 months. That's a long time, living in the cold. China has several very large lakes, particularly in the basin of the Chengjiang or Yangtze River. One of these lakes, the Dongtingung, is 120 kilometres long and 80 kilometres wide. This area has low, flat land and is where most of China's rice is grown. One of the main geographical features of China is the Chengjiang or Yangtze River. Nearly 5,000 kilometres long, it flows sluggishly, but in times of flood it can cause great destruction. Other important features include huge mountain ranges such as the Nanling Mountains and the Great Gobi Desert. Much of China's land is too steep for cultivation. So welcome to Antonio Carlos Zacaria too. Thank you. Just come in. I would just want to remind people that I am, that in fact I'm noticing a number of people come on during the week. They don't come on when I actually deliver these presentations, which is a good thing because you can go back to what I've just said and it's as if I don't have to repeat myself. In fact, I listen to what I say because a lot of what I say comes from here and here as a result of what I'm reading. So I could be wrong. That's why I say, you take on this thing of history, get inspiration from what I do, and if you are interested, contact me. And I have, I have a very large warehouse full of information. But the reality is, you can access now not just books. You can access your TVs, your smart TV, your various tablets. What's missing in all this? It's the interaction of communication. What do you think? What do you think of this? What do you think? It's rather than talk about, other people, making comments about other people. You can talk about history. So if you have a group of people talk about a particular subject area, it offers companionship. It's like in a classroom. And with adults, and I'm interested in adult education a lot because adults are not being looked after very well by governments in general because everything that they do, because they work, they have to pay for. Well, whereas knowledge should come from our interaction with each other and our institutions, especially when we are beginning to learn about something else like history, geography, or how to cook, or how to sew, or how to communicate, how to look at the media, whatever. At the beginning, and I did languages, 20 of them, and in another school, the Saturday school, the School of Languages here in Victoria, got 50 languages. So in these places here, there are specialisations, but when you got private, then the private system takes over and you pay lots and lots of money. So you're not going to do it. So that's why I think certain things should be free. And so when we have a pandemic, etc., and the government wants us to do things, then you can't put on people to pay for things that should be free. It's, that's where the left and the right of politics need to come together. And that's what Confucius would say. Don't be too good or too bad. So got to work it out. So that's basically the geography of China. But that's only the beginning. I didn't say anything else. It's 11:49. I've got an extra 10 minutes, which I want to give to to our own history here in Australia. So will I go on with China next week? Maybe yes, maybe no. I'm not quite sure. And the other thing too, in the next few weeks, I will be, well, maybe I'll be away. So if I'm away, I'll do this lesson or this presentation some other time. But I want to stick to my times because it offers stability. And so wherever I am from, I will, I will try to do these presentations at this time. And can I say that I will introduce other elements to my presentations to reinforce what I'm doing and also to expand the areas of knowledge that I want to chase up. You can do the same. Go for it. until we last year on Facebook. Apparently in 2038, we're going to have another problem with computers. I don't know about this. Probably the media will pick it up now and talk about it. So I've seen a little program about the future of computers, of technology in general, and of us. But we have a limited time, so why not all this technology too? Because don't forget, this is what you learn from Egyptian history. When I did Egypt earlier on in the previous lessons, what I learned is during the Bronze Age, at their peak, they had marvellous architects that built the pyramids, and they built a lot of, because the monuments of Egypt are incredible. And then when the culture, the Hittites, the people invaded Egypt and they lost all their systems, Egypt went backwards. A lot of their knowledge was lost. You need people to keep things going. We experience that right now. Our businesses are saying, what are they saying? We don't have the people. We were looking for people. We can't find them. The right people for the job. And that's what history teaches us. And on that note, let's go to before the invasion. I'm going to talk about fishing. Where did I put the book? Oh gosh. There's me and my, where have I put it? Oh, here it is. Okay. Fishing. We're talking about Australia and 60,000 years of history that was not written down, that came through to us through cave paintings, through some of what the Indigenous people of Australia call their sacred sites. They are rudimentary things that can only be appreciated by local people, and people who disregard those things making mistakes. But at the same time, you have to be truthful about what you keep and what you don't keep, because you've got to survive. For example, we can say, don't kill a crocodile, because it's important. In the 80s, I remember one stage they were saying that crocodiles were going to be extinct, but they are produced from eggs. So all at once they created crocodile farms, and now we have an abundance of crocodiles. So how far, in other words, you've got to balance these things, these interests. There are interests on all sides, including Indigenous interests. So they cannot be ignored. But they cannot also, on the other side, stop certain things. So you need communication. That's where peace comes in. When you are at peace with your people, you can come together and you can discuss things until the problem is resolved. That's what good leaders of history have shown. The bad ones, they use violence, wars. subjugation, all that sort of stuff. So let's have a look how the indigenous people of Australia did their fishing. People living or camping by rivers, lakes or the sea could catch fish for themselves. Some Aborigines used curved fish hooks made from bone or the rim of the spine of a seashell. A simpler kind of hook, a gorge, was made from a straight piece of bone about 5 centimetres long and pointed at both ends. This was tied to a string, baited and flung into the water. I don't do fishing. I have so much respect for fish, but I don't mind eating it when someone else catches it. Total hypocritical sometimes. That's what people are sometimes. You don't want to do things, you respect, climate change, blah, blah, blah. And then we get on a plane that consumes all this. This is what happens. But fishing is done properly. It's part of being human and surviving. This was tied to a string, baited and flung into the water. A fish leapt up to get the bait, the gorge stuck in his throat, and he was yanked onto the land. Pretty cruel. In shallow water, in creeks or where rivers ran into the sea, it was easier to catch fish in hand-sewn nets or in fish traps. In fact, one of my poems, La Aventura di Curiosin, which I'm reading at the moment on ZZZ, I mentioned that Curiosin was caught in a net. Interesting. These traps, really channels leading off from a creek or rivers, were stone walls or fences made from sticks. They were made like a maze. The channels became narrower and narrower. Any fish which entered the maze could turn around, and so I had to keep going until they came to a dead end. Interesting, isn't it, really? You create like a maze, but you've got to know the river, you've got to know. Where was this done? This still there? Who knows? They were caught in a drum-type net made from reeds, or they were speared and flung onto the land. So you spear it, boom. Here we go. A common way to catch fish was by spearing them. A spear, interesting. The spears often had double and triple heads, and the fish had little chance of escaping. Up north, harpoons were used to spear large sea animals in something bigger, for the big ones. The fisherman paddled out in his bark canoe and often speared a turtle or a dugong. Never heard of the word. Dugong. D-U-G-O-N-G. Dugong. Look it up. It's like a turtle, a type of turtle. This he hauled back to shore. So I pulled it to shore, turned it around, and then they get the meat out of them. Along the North Queensland coast, the people had a different way of fishing, using sucker fish. Sucker fish, whatever that is. A sucker fish fastens itself to a larger fish and sea animals by means of a sucker disc on top of its head. So you throw a little one to get the big one. The fisherman fastened the sucker fish to a line and paddled on looking for a turtle or maybe a dugong. And that's how you get the big ones. When they saw one, they flung the sucker fish towards it. See, a bit like our loan sharks. They throw a little one in order to catch the big one. When they saw one, they flung the suckerfish towards it. At once the suckerfish streaked to the turtle and fastened itself securely to it. One of the fishermen then dived over the side and followed the line down. Then he lifted the turtle into the boat with the help of the rest of the crew. Now, remember, some of the books that I read from are very old, and there's only one copy of it. And I'm keeping them because, knowledge is upgraded all the time through editors, and you got to have the market. You got to be big to do these things. You got to be a big publisher. So anyone who writes and you want to do little things like I do. I do my own books. I don't sell many at all. Most of them get given away. But, you know, if you're a really serious writer, find yourself a big publisher, not a little one. A little one, when you can't find them, as a friend of mine said, his name was Pino Boz, he said, I was walking along the street and I wanted to go to the town, and a Rolls Royce came past and he ignores me. Then a Mercedes came past, he ignored me. Then somebody with a mini car ignored me. Someone on a bike ignored me. And this guy with his donkey, he saw me and he said, hey, Pino, would you like to come over? I'll take you to the, to the village, to the town. And he went on. And when they saw him, because Pino was a great, very well-known person and writer and all that, and they said, Pino, what's wrong with you? Why did you get on the donkey to come back to town? Couldn't someone give you a lift? He said, no. He said, that's what I had that was good to me and delivered me here. And I appreciate the guy who asked me to get on top of his donkey to come home because I was very tired. There you are. So, that's it. Using these methods, the Aborigines caught all sorts of fish, even larger ones, like mulloway, dolphin or shark. Sometimes they were lucky enough to find a stranded whale, which pushed them back into the sea now. But at the time, if you got a whale, you could feed a whole village. This provided food for a long time for them and for all the people nearby. So one whale. Now we have people who go and fish for them and get hundreds of them. That's where the moderation comes in, Confucius. Did it get to Japan? And also other nations in the north. They go fishing for big things. Other seafoods they caught along the coast and in the river mouths were crabs, crayfish and other shellfish. Rivers provided plentiful food supply. Shellfish, waterfowl, fish, tortoise and platypus. Even platypus were caught by means of weirs, nets and traps. Wow, they even ate the platypus. I didn't know that. So there you are. How are we going? 11 or 2. Well, that's for the fishing part. Now, maybe I have to... No, I'll do something else. As I said, I want to do a few other things as we move along. So that's the one for this week. Fishing. The next one, maybe I could do one more. Then I won't have time. Food in the desert. So that's interesting, isn't it? Australia. How do we look at what, this is a reflection of mine right now, and it should be a reflection of yours. We have a lot of water in the north. We also have roads that are built. We have some parts of Australia that has no water. Why can't we pipe the water to those areas? Like along the roads. Just create possibilities of delivering water where there's none or where there's little. And, that's why when we do history, we look at the way various civilizations existed and lived. For example, China, I want to go back to China. In some books, they say, China is mysterious because they didn't share knowledge, No, we don't know much. It's a very monotonous past. We don't know much about it at all. We don't know the early parts. When did the Chinese civilization started? But they are the oldest one with written evidence of their past and written on paper, which they invented. And they also invented other gunpowder, fireworks. There's a lot of stuff that the Chinese have had. Silkworms we mentioned last week. Silkworms were domesticated. So silk was made from silkworms, and the Chinese kept it to themselves. Did they keep it to themselves? See, this is where, somebody, I think it's just the fact that the writing is difficult for someone who hasn't gone to school, hasn't followed the writing closely. And I suspect a lot of Chinese don't know Chinese writing very well at all. The 9 parts of speech are still important. But the Chinese, I was speaking to somebody yesterday, they said about learning Chinese. And I said, look, it could be that the 9 parts of speech are there, but some parts of the speech is like in Latin, they've got declensions. In other words, if you want to say book, okay, but you want to say, I gave the book of history, the history book, the book of history. So maybe, that book has a declension, it changes. The Latin has declensions. They've got the nominative, and then, the genitive, then the dative, then the accusative, the vocative, and the ablative. And German uses the declensions rather than the prepositions, to, at, in, from, etc. But I don't know these things. You've got to find out. But when you start the discussion and you start learning, that's why I say that adult education becomes absolutely important for a nation to skill its people. And not just for practical things. You also need good philosophers, you need good thinkers, you need people who look at, all sorts of areas of knowledge. It enriches all of us. What I know and I share enriches all of us. And it's important. And now, thanks to Dr. and Professor Google, Chrome, and I still don't remember the other one, one of these days. Safari! Finally, I remembered. So, Google, Chrome, Safari, they are the 3. There are many more others. I've got to find them out, slowly come out. So to get to Safari, it's taken me, 10 weeks, because I look it up, then I forget. I use it as well. Then I forget when I'm doing the presentation. So do I worry about making mistakes? No, come on. I encourage you to make mistakes because you'll never learn without making mistakes. So that's that. That's before the invasion. Now, we have, in the next few weeks, going to celebrate, next couple of weeks, Australia's colonial history. They lived according to their means at the time. They probably were wrong in a lot of ways because they were cruel, they had arms and they used them, they brought in diseases, all sorts of things. But for 60,000 years, Australia remained as it was. And then the invasion began, slowly but surely. It was inevitable. Like it's inevitable that we invade the universe, our stars, our planets. It's survival of the fittest. When Earth blows, somebody else can have another planet somewhere else, and so the universe keeps going. Important. This one here is, again, Benja Patterson. He's a very important writer of Australia, who wrote during the 90s, 1890s. It's 130 years ago. And, he wrote some beautiful poetry. And this one here is called A Bushman's Song, the song of a bushman, of someone who lives in the bush. Here we go. I'm travelling down to Castlereagh, and I am a station hand. I'm handy with the roping pole, I'm handy with the brand, and I can ride a rowdy colt or swing the axe all day. Pretty strong. But there is no demand for a station hand along the Castlereagh. Welcome, Angela. Good to see you coming on. So it's shift, boys, shift, for there isn't the slightest doubt that we've got to make a shift to the stations further out. With the pack horse running after, for he follows like a dog, we must strike across the country at the old jig-jog. This old black horse I'm riding, if you'll notice what's his brand, he wears the crooked R, you see, none better in the land. Horse like cars, branded. We've got the numbers at the back of the car. And that's what they did for horses before, in the 1890s. It takes a lot of beating. And the other day we tried, for a bit of a joke, with a racing bloke for £20 a side. So they used the horses to horse racing. It was shift, boys, shift, for there wasn't the slightest doubt that I had to make him shift, for the money was nearly out. But he cantered home a winner with the other one at the flog. His red-hot sort of pickup with his old jig-jog. You need to... This is Benjamin Patterson, 130 years ago. The language has changed. But I'm going to keep going, and then you can look it up. It's called A Bushman's Song by A.B. Patterson. I asked a cove for shearing once along the Martha-Guy. We shear non-union here, he says he. I call it scab. A scab was someone who didn't belong to the union. Says I looked along this shearing floor before I turned to go. Antonio Dancy, welcome. There were 8 or 10 dashed Chinamen shearing in a row. Chinamen shearing in the 1890s. Well, guess what? They came here during the gold rushes of the 1850s and even before. And guess what? They actually arrived here with the Chinese fleet in northwestern Australia in the year 11, 12, 1300 at the peak of, the Mongolian thing when they started to... But they didn't invade. They came, saw and went, never came back. Just in small numbers. So that's how it is. It was shift, boy, shift, for there wasn't the slightest doubt it was time to make a shift with the leprosy about. There was leprosy as well in Australia. Wow. So I saddled up my horses and I whistled to my dog and I left his scabby station at the old jig-jog. So there was a non-union labour, there was leprosy. What's new? I went to Illawarra, where my brother's goat got a farm. He has to ask his landlord's leave before he lifts his arm. He has to ask his landlord, can I lift my arm? Because he's supposed to work all the time. The landlord owns the countryside, men, women, dog and cat. He owns everything. They haven't the cheek to dare to speak without they touch their hat. Hello, landlord. It was shift, boys, shift, for there wasn't the slightest doubt their little landlord God, and I would soon have fallen out. Was I to touch my hat to him? Was I this blooming dog? So I make up makes for up the country at the old jig jogs. He says, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do anything. And this reminds me of the New Stone Age villages, where the boss was the boss, and that's it. And in that Ertugrul Resurrection series on Netflix, that sort of stuff. It's in a lot of cultures, small village. But it's time that I was moving of a mighty way to go till I drink artesian water from 1,000 feet below. Artesian water in the north, big. There's a whole sea of artesian water. That's cool water. You've got to go 1,000 feet below. Till I meet the overlanders with the cattle coming down, and I'll work a while till I make a pile, that's money, then have a spree in town, and then just blow it in the town on all the good things, drink, gambling, women, and everything else, whatever you want. So shift, boys, shift, for there isn't the slightest doubt we've got to make a shift to the stations further out. The pack horse runs behind us, for he follows like a dog, and we cross a lot of country at the old jig jog. Now, this one here, Bushman Song, applies to us today, because today we have a need to go into the regions. And because of technology, a lot of people are moving there. The countryside is going to benefit from this pandemic, even though they're going to lose the people they used to hire from outside. Maybe it's time for a lot of people who have difficulties in the town to go out the Bushman Song. Because, was it him? No, it wasn't. Benja Patterson. I have to look up the other Australian writers, and I've got another one here, Henry Lawson. Henry Lawson writes as well about Australia of that time, and then there was all the people who made paintings. Very interesting, the 1890s, and there was also depression. There was a lot of problems in the factories as well. A lot of stuff in the past. So I've come to, before the invasion of Australia, I said I was going to dedicate a bit more time to that, but now it's for me time to enjoy myself and look up at my past. Now, let me see, a number of, this was about 1918. So I went to the exhibition building. Here we are. And I saw this little bird. That's one. Hang on, more to come. Did you like that? I love that. Now this one here was in the middle of winter, and I don't know. I won't play that. I'll play this one here. This one here. Let me see. There's another one here of the same type. More closely, looking at those birds eating. There are birds looking for breakfast, or, Must have been early in the morning. I must have gone to the hospital. There they are. A whole group of birds enjoying themselves. Fantastic stuff, huh? So that's what I like. But now I'm going to give you something. We went to the Maribyrnong Library, and we had an afternoon of music. So let's have a look. Here we go. There we are. Well, they're fantastic, really and truly. That was an Italian. Afternoon at the library. We've done many of those in schools and libraries over the years, and Andrew and Dura always come around. I do the presentation, I do the books, this and that. Move around in the wider community because all groups need people that do this. So here we go again. I love that. I'm just going to do now, there's another one here, which is beautiful as well. But I'm going to wait a little bit because I want to talk about what I am doing right now, and that is world history. We have covered so far the Paleolithic age, the Old Stone Age times, which went on for millions of years, and then we got to the New Stone Age. That's about 20, 30,000 years ago, up to then the formation of the Neolithic villages. And those Neolithic villages are like little towns, and we have them all over the world still. A lot of people live, isolated in the sense that they have small communities, and there is, small community life can be very peaceful, and there can be a lot of harmony. And if people care for each other, then that's the way to do it. And in fact, a lot of people in the third age, they move out to near the sea or whatever. Well, for me, it's great, but I love the city. I love to do what I'm doing and have all the facilities around. So that's the trade-off. The trade-off is you either keep moving or you stop and enjoy the nature and smell the roses, as they say. So that's the way to do it. Then my Italian lessons, they're getting more and more, not complex. We're coming to the end of the 9 parts of speech. I've just prepared for the pluperfect, the composite tenses. There'll be 2 more composite tenses after this, and then the regular verbs, will be finished. So in other words, I said that grammar is finite. Once I present it, the next thing after that will be to go through the irregularities of it. But then it's all pratica, pratica, pratica. After this, there will be practice on this, whether it's a prose, whether it's sentences, whether it's singing, whether it's whatever it is, reading about science, reading about music, anything interesting. So on that note there, I'm going to play for you one other beautiful piece of music here. So here we go. Thanks a lot, mate. That was... I didn't check. I didn't check the rest. I didn't check it before I showed it, so sorry. But that's the way it is. Let me see if there's any more. If there's any more. No. Okay. Well, that was it. There was something else. Again, these things here, you have to check them before. I thought this is the first time that I even checked something, but maybe it's because I'm thinking this. I want to show you a bit of the sky. Here we go. There you are, from an aeroplane. Well, how was that? Dear. Let me see. There's, I don't know, 22. Oh, there you are. Oh. See, I even show you from up north. up in the sky. Look at that. I have some beautiful footage from the sky, and I've written poetry about the, looking down to earth. It's just beautiful. Anyway, that's that. So I thought I'd vary the presentation today and give something different, and I will improve on this, I'm sure, as I go along. And that's what I encourage you to do. It's, have variety in people, in what you're doing. History is important, world history. Don't just look at your own nation, look at others. The final thing is Dante Alighieri is moving on very well, and unfortunately I had organised 2 afternoons at Federazione Lucana to present Dante's Inferno on the 23rd and the 30th, but I'm not sure now with these lockdowns again, these restrictions, how things are going to go, but we keep on trying and we always hope for the best. And on that note, since I'm over time, I thank you very much for the company. I really appreciate anyone who leaves a message because it encourages me to keep going. Grazie mille, thank you. I'll see you next week, same time. Ciao from Tom Padula, TomPadulaTV, or Tom Padula on YouTube, and also Insegna Booksellers. And spend some time on Insegna Booksellers. There's a blog there. Have a look at it. Okay. Ciao. Arrivederci. Okay. Now let me finish, and then we can look at it again together.